everything in our communication is story. In one way, whether it's a good form or whether it's terrible form, like most people, to be an effective communicator, you got to be able to not only tell stories, but you have to be able to lead the person listening to you so they can tell themselves a story about you, because that's the most believable story, if I understand this correctly. So how do we shape our brand? How do we do the brand story so that...
I want to use this on you, and that's why I asked the question. Okay. How long were you a chiropractor before the accident?
4 years.
And why were you in the chiropractic business in the first place? What was your why, your reason for being?
Hey everybody, I'm Ken Newhouse, and I'm going to welcome you to the Get Clients Now podcast, the show where high-growth consultants and professionals come to access the newest and most effective methods and systems for online marketing, advanced sales and persuasive communication strategies, and automated marketing funnels. And if you're wondering if the Get Clients Now podcast can help you get more high-value clients, enjoy more sales, build a massive tribe, and make more money, you're absolutely going to love this show.
Newhouse's work completely blows everything else that we've ever done with Google out of the water.
I have been looking for a way to grow my presence online, and what I've viewed from Newhouse's work was something that certainly is faster than anything I've seen before.
He says he's going to do something and he does it. He does it in the time frame that he says he's going to do it in. It's exciting when you talk about the results that you're going to get, and you can believe his word because he follows it up with action.
The Newhouse is direct, he's to the point, he tells you what's on his mind, and he backs his words up. From what I know now, from working with him, he's passionate about his work, and he backs it up 100%.
What I like best is you offer something that no one else has out there, which is a pretty comprehensive approach about marketing a system.
If somebody asks me, should they use the Newhouse's team? Absolutely, because you're going to get the important information that you need very, very quickly.
On the internet, on the different marketing techniques, I've never experienced anything like this.
I would definitely recommend Ken Newhouse for someone who's serious about growing their business. I think that your results based on the numbers would at least double the sales in a very short time frame.
Hey everybody, Ken Newhouse here from kennewhouse.com, and I'm going to welcome you back to the Get Clients Now podcast, where the one-size-fits-all marketing model is dumb, the client-centric business model is king, and the sales control system gives you the tools to build your tribe with certainty. Today, I'm excited to announce that MailChimp is now supporting the Get Clients Now podcast. With MailChimp, you'll find all your marketing needs in one place. Bring your audience data, marketing channels, and insights together so you can reach your goals faster. With MailChimp, you can promote your business across email, social, landing pages, postcards, and more, all from a single platform. This is episode number 334, and today is the second half of my interview with Park Howell. Park is the host of the Business of Story podcast, creator of the Story Cycle System, and author of the new book. It's not out for release yet, but be looking for it on Amazon in the next couple of months. And the title of that book is Brand Bewitchery: How to Wield the Story Cycle System to Craft Spellbinding Stories for Your Brand. Now, in my ongoing effort to bring you methods that get you clients, I want to remind you that today's episode is the last in the series we've been doing on storytelling for business. And as I mentioned on last week's show, I'd planned on having Seth Godin and Donald Miller on for this series on storytelling for business, but it's actually going to be several more months before their schedules line up with ours. So when those interviews roll around, which should be sometime in April, maybe in May, we're going to be doing another series on the same subject. And we're going to have those two, Seth Godin, Donald Miller, and another couple really, really impressive guests for you guys. So be sure to be looking for those episodes, like I said, sometime in late April, possibly into the month of May. Now, I'm sure at this point you've recognized the importance and relevance of storytelling and why it's in your best interest to master and deploy it in your business at every level. Every single level of your business should incorporate storytelling in some way, shape, or form. Listen, you should be using storytelling in your marketing, your messaging, your communications with your clients, your customers, patients, with your team and your vendors, because when you can get this nailed down, when you can get this right, you're going to have even more methods that get you clients in your marketing arsenal. Now, in last week's episode, you heard Park ask me two distinct questions about this podcast. And the first question was, what led me to start the Get Clients Now podcast? And two, as he mentioned, Park has built his own very, very successful podcast, which is called, again, Business of Story. And before he asked me the second question, he pre-framed it with this statement. He said, Ken, building a successful podcast takes an enormous investment of time, money, and effort. That's an understatement. And he said, I know that from personal experience. And he's right. He said, you've built an amazingly successful show, and week in and week out, as one of your subscribers, I can honestly say You deliver exceptional content that we can use as your listeners in our businesses. I know that one of your primary goals for every episode of your podcast is to showcase methods that get you clients, which is cool. Now, I want to know, what is it that inspires you? What motivates you, Ken, to put out awesome content week after week after week on your show? And I got to be honest with you. No one's really ever asked me that question, and my answer to him was quite simple. Our clients, our members, and fans of this show, for the most part, I would say, are entrepreneurs. Whether you're a professional like a dentist or a chiropractor or you're a consultant or you're a sales professional, something like that, we're all entrepreneurs. And like me, I see you kind of as a lone polar bear in a forest of grizzlies, meaning that in an overwhelming number of cases, you're trying to build your business under some pretty tough circumstances. So as an example, while you might have employees, you might have 1, 2, you might have 100, I know that you feel isolated. I know that many times you don't have anybody to talk to on a quote, like a peer-to-peer level, someone who genuinely understands the challenges that you face day in and day out. I also know that in a lot of instances, you don't have anyone you can truly share your victories with. You don't have someone who understands the effort, the hard work, the sleepless nights, and the risk. Yes, there is a lot of risk in running your own business. You don't have someone who understands the risk that it took to achieve those victories. Sadly, I know that in spite of all the good that you do for others, I know that there are a lot of instances where people simply don't appreciate you, and there are other times when people simply disrespect you. Having worked with so many entrepreneurs over the last 25 years, I know that you have probably been labeled a workaholic or told that you're greedy or that you're an evil person because you're successful, which is why people like Crazy Bernie or Pocahontas should never, ever be president of this country. I also know that a lot of people that listen to the Get Clients Now podcast are sales professionals or they're business owners and they do all the selling, which can be very, very difficult. I get it. I understand that. So listen, I'm about to bring Park back in on the show, but before I do, let me say this. Selling is a proud profession, and sales professionals, business owners, and marketers who have to do the heavy lifting of selling, in my opinion, these are the unsung heroes of our economy. I love our president. I'm an advocate, a staunch supporter of Donald Trump. Not everything that he says, of his results and what he's doing for this country, right? But make no mistake about it. People who sell stuff are the unsung heroes of this economy, and they are the engine on which everything and everyone depends. And these people like you, and my desire to give you methods that get you clients are the fuel that keep me going and the reason that I put so much time, money, and effort into this podcast. And that just about sums it up. So if you're ready, let's go ahead and continue our conversation with the world's leading expert on brand storytelling, Mr. Park Howell. You addressed that perfectly, and I think, I'm not sure of the year, if it was like 2005, maybe later, Seth Godin's book, he initially titled the book, All Marketers Are Liars, and then he retitled the book, All Marketers Are Storytellers. But he talks a lot about being authentic and, the importance of that. Now, one of the questions that I hear, because I have another podcast, the .com Dentist podcast, and what I've tried to do is, when I started this podcast 3 years ago, really was kind of on a whim. It's just like when I wrote my first book. I didn't have a publisher, I self-published, but, talking to Jason McDonald, he's going to be on the show. He's written 2 of the best-selling SEO and social media books ever published. He's self-published. He's an adjunct clinical professor at Stanford, and he teaches an SEO class. But he's also written the 2 best books on SEO. He's SEO, the SEO workbook, and the social media marketing workbook 2020. But he's like, I don't want a publisher. But, having said that, in talking to my clients, a lot of them are like, well, hey, listen, like dentists. My point is, hey, you need to learn this because you've got the captive audience. You've got a patient sitting in a chair, and if they're not anesthetized or they're not, asleep, you shouldn't be wasting your time telling stories or idle chit-chat with your assistant or your hygienist. You should be telling stories that are going to benefit you and maybe get that patient to move up in an upsell to maybe from fixing a cavity to maybe getting some cosmetic dentistry, things like that. And one of the things I hear this from my consultant clients as well. We tell stories all the time. We talk about stuff and we tell stories all the time, but you've got to have structure to this. There has to be a strategy to this. There's a difference, isn't there, between just telling stories and doing this strategically for business purposes?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why at the beginning of the show, I talked about my main goal when working with people, whether I'm doing a speaking engagement, doing a master class for leadership on how to become better storytellers or doing an overall brand strategy session, brand narrative session, is I make the point that we are intuitive storytellers. I want you to become intentional. And I can hear that all the time. People go, oh, yeah, I'm already telling all kinds of stories. Well, I can guarantee you those are long, drawn-out affairs that probably get boring 2/3 of the way in because they haven't used proper story structure. The audience is oftentimes going, where in the hell is this going? And my God, when they finally get to the point they're thinking, couldn't they have made that 2 minutes ago? That's the problem. So they're thinking in story and they're telling this long linear journey when they can boil it down to a couple different things. One is this wonderful narrative template of the and, but, and therefore, which I call the one floor elevator pitch. Learned it from my good friend, Dr. Randy Olson. And it helps you put together, and I kind of used it on you all earlier, setup, problem, resolution, perfect 3-act structure. The and is the exposition or act one, you set it up. So you set the stage and then raise the importance. The but throws in the problem or the complication that now is standing in the way of where you want to go on this journey. And the therefore, I am here to help you. Give you an example. And by the way, this particular tool I found is amazing in brand building to get you really focused on your message and what your brand stands for. So for instance, I am a brand enthusiast. That's what I do. It's my core strength in the advertising marketing world is helping brands, whether it's some large brand, it's a challenger organization coming up, or it's a leader trying to understand what their own personal brand is to grow their influence. It's just what I do, what I'm good at, what I really enjoy doing is boiling it down. So I stand before you and your viewers right now as one of hundreds of thousands of brand experts in the world. And I stand in front of you as it's growing tens and 20,000s of storytelling experts in front of you. Everyone seems to be an expert, but they haven't done the deep dive it takes to really understand this. So how do I differentiate myself? Why do you care that I'm doing this? And how am I any different from all the rest of those? So I use this really simple ABT framework. And again, my specialty is at brand storytelling. So I set the stage. Ken, I've been in the branding marketing world for 35 years, and now I want to raise the stakes and have helped hundreds of purpose-driven brands grow through the influence of mass media. Okay, great. Act one is over, but I learned in 2006 that technology has completely leveled the playing field and brands no longer own the influence of mass media. In fact, the masses are the media and they own your story. That's the problem. That's how do you hack through that? So therefore, I now consult, teach, coach, and speak on the primal power of story to hack through the techno noise and hook the hearts of your customers. Setup, problem, resolution, that quick. Although I'm explaining it here, it's taking a minute or two. I can fire that off in 20 seconds. My one floor elevator pitch. And what I've done is successfully hooked into the subconscious of the listener, the limbic system of where we make meaning out of the madness of being human beings, and have laid out this problem solution dynamic so simple that they don't have to work for it, that they ultimately get it. Now, you can use that same AB structure for everything. As I mentioned, at ASU, when I was teaching the executives around the world, they would come back and say, I use that structure in writing my emails now. And I've cut my time down by 3/4 in writing emails. They've gone from this long to this long. And the people that get them actually say they know what I'm talking about now, of doing the setup and raise the stakes. But the problem is, therefore, we need to do this. Simple 3-act structure, problem solution dynamic, and I have found that to be the most fundamental, powerful little narrative framework that I use in all of my work.
That's amazing. You know, one of the things that got me so fascinated, and I didn't mention this before, I told you I was in an accident with a dump truck. I was hit head on.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of put the kibosh on me practicing. I had 6 clinics, I had associate doctors, but I had massive head injuries. And for 9 days, I was in a coma. I was told, my wife and my parents were told, my sisters, I might not live. But
wow.
For 6 months after I came out of that, And it literally, I snapped out of it. They had me in a ward in the hospital where I was like in a stroke unit. And I just remember I was at this big table in the cafeteria, and some of the patients, mostly they were elderly, were tied to their chairs. Some of them were drooling, some of them were, kind of catatonic. And I looked at my wife and I said, why am I here? She's like, you've had a head injury. I said, I know I've had a head injury. Why am I here with these people? But as it turns out, those massive head injuries, I had diplopia for 6 months. I had double vision. I couldn't drive. I couldn't practice. Couldn't practice because I've had 18 surgeries. I had all these fractures. But long story short, I became fascinated with how the brain works. And so what you're saying is completely and utterly based in science. I learned a lot of this as a chiropractor, but I took it so much further because of the massive injuries and the deficiencies. I had problems. I mean, I had friends that I had known, relatives, my whole life. I could tell you anything about them, and I couldn't tell you their name. I knew them better than anybody else. I didn't know their name. And it was the weirdest thing. And so as I progressed through this recovery, I became really fascinated with, hey, what's going on up here? I need to know this. And I got better and better. And thankfully, probably actually doing better than I was before the accident, at least my brain function. But, science has a lot to say about this. Storytelling is ingrained in our DNA. And actually, who was it that said, I think it was Doug Stevenson said that, stories that use emotion are the stories that have the biggest impact. And emotion is the fast lane to the brain. And so when we're talking about our brand and storytelling, what is the connection there between, hey, I want to build my brand. I've got to build an online presence. I want to control the narrative of my brand. I want to control where it goes and how it does. Where does story come into that as far as how you control that and shape that and make that grow your brand specifically?
Yeah, great question. And by the way, I have a question for you. How long has it been since your accident?
October 5th, 1994, and it was at 10:14 a.m.
Wow.
I drove through a 2-lane construction in between one of my practices and another practice, and I had driven through, not at the same point on the road because it moved every day. They were repaving Highway 49. I had an office in Steelville, Missouri, and this is actually when I was relatively young. I had an office. I just moved back from California. I'm originally from St. Louis, but I moved to California. I ended up practicing in Newport Beach. I lived in Santa Monica when I first got there. Practiced in Newport Beach by Fashion Island, and then I also practiced in the city of Orange about 2 or 3 blocks away from Disneyland. So I had 2 different places there, but then when I was here, I moved back. I bought a house and 2 practices from a chiropractor. I want to have my own house, and it turns out the house I found was owned by a chiropractor, and he said, hey, I'm selling my clinics. And so I bought this enormous house and 2 clinics, and so every day, one clinic was I gutted it, was having it refurbished. Wanted to make it all new because it was an older, kind of rundown, dingy, outdated office.
Mm-hmm.
So new carpet, new furniture, all that stuff. So I would drive back and forth between my house and these 2 locations. And the day I had my accident, I was less than a half mile away from the new office where I had an office full of people, probably over 100 people there. Because in a small town, this was in a small town, I had the mayor of the town there. I had the local newspaper there. I had all these people who had come. Well, it was like the big deal for the grand opening. And half a mile away, they sent me through. I was the first, this isn't a rural area. Like I said, there wasn't any traffic, hardly at all. I was the first car and sometimes the only car to go through in my direction. And that day there were a line of cars, but I was the first car. And the radio men, the flag men were twice the legal distance apart. They were so far apart that there was no connection between the radios. So one guy says to himself, hey, listen, there's nobody coming. I guess they're waiting for me to send my guys. And the other guy at the other end who sent the dump truck who had 30 tons of asphalt sent him. And this is, in Missouri where I live, it's very hilly and it's not mountainous, but it's big hills, curvy roads, 2 lanes. He came from one direction and I came at the other. He only hit me doing about 25 miles an hour, but it broke his neck and it literally crushed my Jeep Cherokee I was in. The left front wheel of my vehicle was it was under my driver's seat and behind me. How I survived, I was flown by Arch Helicopter once they cut me out of the Jeep, which took an hour and a half to get me out of it. Flown by helicopter to St. Louis University, I made it, but my brain was so trashed. That's why I was going to die. They thought I would die because of the head injuries I had and just the massive bleeding in my head. But over time, my desire to want to know, what's wrong with my brain? Why is it doing this? And over time, it got better and better and better. But really, the function of all that, to go back to my question, and as I told you before, communication and storytelling for business is one of the most effective methods that can get you clients. And that's why I'm really, really passionate about being the most effective communicator I can be. And I understand now. And when it dawned on me, it literally hit me like a ton of bricks. Everything in our communication is story. In one way, whether it's a good form or whether it's terrible form, like most people, to be an effective communicator, you got to be able to not only tell stories, but you have to be able to lead the person listening to you so they can tell themselves a story about you, because that's the most believable story, if I understand this correctly, of the story. So how do we shape our brand? How do we do the brand story so that...
I want to use this on you, and that's why I asked the question.
Okay.
How long were you a chiropractor before the accident?
4 years.
And why were you in the chiropractic business in the first place? What was your why, your reason for being?
Well, I'm ashamed to say it now, but it was about money, because I was a computer programmer at the time, and I actually had gone to an anatomy class at a local college at night because I was into competitive bodybuilding, and I wanted to be more successful. I wanted an edge, so I took an anatomy class, and it turns out the guy teaching the class was Guy Dauphine, Dr. Guy Dauphine, who was the anatomy professor at Logan College of Chiropractic. He said, "You ever think about being a chiropractor?" I'm like, "What is that?"
Yeah.
And then I didn't know. Kid in the class, taking the class with me, was getting ready to go to Logan. He's like, "My brother's a chiropractor. Here, let me come adjust your neck," which was probably not a good idea at the time, but I'm like, wow, that was cool. He's like, he's got his own plane. He's got like 3 houses. And I mean, he's making $200,000 a month, which at the time I didn't believe him, but later I found out, hey, that's totally true. I mean, it's definitely doable. And that's why I wanted to make money.
So, and you had bought this big house and you have these 2 clinics, and then you get hit on the way to the clinic, if I got that right. So your whole dream was wiped out with that dump truck collision.
Instantly.
Then why do you do what you do now? You work primarily with dentists, and you have a real nice niche in helping dentists grow their practices. Why are you the dental guy to go to?
And I don't work with just any dentists. I work with dentists who are specialists. As an example, the dentists that I work with primarily are dentists who do not only cosmetic, but restorative dentistry. One of the techniques they use is called biorejuvenation. So it's very similar to what I did as a chiropractor. I was a specialist. And so, if you've been to a chiropractor before, most of the time they're going to do imaging studies. They're going to shoot radiographs, pictures of your spine, and they're going to show you the pictures and say, look, it should look like this. This is what you look like. We need to fix it. But the problem with most chiropractors is the procedures and the treatment protocols they use don't actually change anything, and they never take a follow-up picture.
Mm-hmm.
I had a treatment protocol. It was chiropractic biophysics, where I would actually shoot post films, and we would get to the point where your spine looks as good as it's going to get, and it's changed, and now you're done. You don't have to keep coming back. Maintenance is primarily your responsibility. And so I found these dentists who were doing the same thing by treating TMJ dysfunction with dentistry and alleviating all these different health problems. And I'm like, listen, I love marketing. I love persuasion. I love writing copy. I love the challenge of that. But now I guess the appeal for me in working with dentists is that I found something very similar to what I did that's really making a huge impact in the life of the patient. And I guess vicariously, I'm able to work through them and affect the patient, where I really miss being a chiropractor.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just not possible. I mean, I would see 100 to 125 patients a day. That's just not, that would kill me now to do. That would just kill me.
So your ABT, the foundational story for your unique brand would be something like, and I'm going to butcher this a little bit. You don't have to fix it up, but you say, back in the mid 90s, I was building a successful practice in chiropractic practice focused on bioregeneration. And there was a day when I was heading to the opening of my 2 beautiful new clinics, but I was hit by a dump truck and nearly killed. Therefore, today I can't practice chiropractic work like I wanted to, but what I do is apply my skills in marketing to the regeneration of the specialists in the dental industry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm your person to help you grow this specialty in the dental world. Setup, problem resolution. Again, I butchered that. You can clean it up. But what I've done there, if your listeners are following along, set up, raise the stakes, boom. But then, the universe pulls the rug out from underneath your feet, hit by a dump truck that changed everything. Now, instead of practicing chiropractic work, I focus and help dental specialists grow their practices in biorejuvenation and so forth.
That's good. I like that.
Something like that. So that's how quickly you can kind of start putting this together. But to answer your question back a little ways is how do you do this? Is you have to sit down and you have to first come up with your origin story. Why do you do what you do? And how can you have a much greater impact in the world than just making money for yourself? What are you ultimately trying to do to help people? Answer that question. Build out that origin story. In essence, today your viewers and listeners have heard my origin story and they've heard your origin story. I want them to do the exact same thing with that. Then from there, my process is the story cycle system, this 10-step process that helps you build a brand narrative based off of that origin story that helps your audiences live into that imagined reality of tomorrow could be better than today, if only you will allow me in to help you get what you want out of life. You build on that. And the thing about it is when it's truthful, when it's absolutely authentic, nobody can take that away from you. They can't argue with you. They might try to throw stones at you to discredit you, but then you back it up with all these little anecdotal stories of how you're delivering day in and day out in the world to proof out your overall brand narrative, that purpose behind your brand. So at the very end, the very ninth step of the story cycle system is to, after going through all this, is determine what your purpose is in the world. Why do you exist beyond making money? Why do you exist to help people accomplish what? And I found in all of this, the old way of branding, it was very academic, very brand-centric, as we talked about earlier. The new way of doing it, when you are placing your audiences and customers at the center of the story, automatically makes you more understanding of their journey in the world, more empathetic about who they are and what they want and what stands in their way, and then makes you the most reliable and urgent and relevant resource for them to bring into their life to get what they want out of the world. And what it does is it completely humanizes your offering. And that's what people want today. They want to buy from people. They don't want to buy from big brands. In fact, they're going to shun big brands for the most part. They want to know that you are there, care for your employees, care for your customers, care for the communities you serve, and care for our planet. And you can only do that from a human perspective. You can't do it from a spreadsheet perspective.
You're like the guide or the trusted advisor that, it's going to show them you've been down the path, and you're going to, just like from a story, hero's journey, you're going to show them, hey, I've been there, I've slain the dragon, now I'm going to help you slay your dragon.
Yeah, exactly right. And they have to just make this paradigm shift of realizing they are not the center of the story. They are not the hero on the journey. The brand plays a more important role of mentor or guide.
Absolutely.
None of us achieve anything of significance without the help of others. Pure and simple.
That has been the most difficult, I think, of all the different clients that I work with. And, I work with the different types of consultants, a couple chiropractors and a lot of dentists. But it seems to me the dentists have had the hardest time understanding because they're specialists. I mean, they're, dental surgeons and, they're like a big deal. Hey, listen, it's not about you. Really, it's not about you. It's about the people you're trying to serve, man. And getting that through their head. And, eventually they do. But they seem to me, at least in my experience, I've had a harder time getting them to understand that's not how you tell a brand story. It's not, they don't care where you went to school. They don't care about your awards. They don't care about your certificates. They don't care. They care about themselves. What about your team, your staff? How do you bring them into this process of telling the brand story in the proper way? Is there a process for that?
Yeah, let me show you one thing. Can I share my screen for a second? Because this actually has to do with the dental world. Let me show you this one slide because it's just so relevant. Can you see that full screen right here?
Yeah.
So Eric Relier, I'm not sure how you say his name. I've never met Eric, but he's been a member of our private Facebook group for a couple of years. And by the way, any of you can join if you like. Come on over to Business of Story, Stories for Purpose-Driven Leaders, private Facebook group on Facebook, and we'll love to bring you in. He sent this note about the ABT and figuring out how does he tell this story. He says, took a stab at applying AB and T method, feels a bit like I'm using circular logic. And then he goes on, and he does use circular logic. Not his fault, just an expert, curse of the expert, too close to it. So he says, there are literally millions of people, patients and non-patients alike, who are ashamed of or unhappy with their smile and not able to find an easy, painless, and affordable way to regain the life-changing confidence of smile. So that was his setup and statement. it's too long. It's already introducing the problem before he's really set it up and so forth. And then he gets in where the contradiction or the problem should be. But Smiles transition is easy, painless, and affordable. Anyways, he's already selling here the answer. And I'm saying, no, you're not there yet. You haven't established the problem yet. He gets there down. Therefore, Smile Transitions is an excellent treatment option for patients who are hesitant to commit to more involved restorative treatment. So you can see Eric is kind of fishing around, and this happens to all of us. So get this down on paper and look at this and go, oh my God, it hurts. So when I saw this, and because I do the ABT all the time, I can sort through this pretty quickly and say, well, here's his ABT. So I wrote back to him in just a couple minutes. Here's my ABT for him. Nothing lights up a room like a beautiful smile. Set the stage. And millions of people wish they could enhance their teeth. Raise the stakes. But here's the problem. But they think it's difficult, painful, and expensive, period. Therefore, Smile Transitions is the fastest, most affordable way to restore your pearly whites and brighten your confidence. Eric writes back, wow, thank you. Now I get it. And of course, being the smart ass I am, is I had to answer, finding your theme is often like pulling teeth, painful and messy. But I found the ABT to be the Smile Transitions of branding. Therefore, smiley face, story on.
That's awesome.
I had to share that with you just because, well, we're talking about dentists and whatnot.
Yeah, the dentist, I don't know why it's because of the clinical mindset. It's not because they're not super intelligent people, because I've never met a dentist that I didn't think was just unbelievably intelligent and obviously very, very educated. But it's the mindset of how they approach this. I don't know if it's just a different thought process and how their brain works. I don't know. I mean, as a chiropractor, I learned all the different sciences and clinical and medical and all those different things. But, as a chiropractor, you're much more outgoing, you're much more gregarious, you're much more personable than a medical doctor. Not necessarily dentists, because dentists are putting their hands on people. But I do find that dentists, as a general rule, at least the ones I've been working with, have a harder time. They still are able to pick this up, but they have a harder time understanding that, hey, listen, I am not the center of the story. I can't be if this is going to work. The people I want to serve, the people I want as my ideal patient, I have to make them in my brand story. They have to be the hero, and I'm the guide. I'm the guy or the gal that's going to help them get to the end, to the pot of gold, so to speak, to get where they want to go in their story. So you mentioned, I don't know if we got the answer to that or not, but how do we bring the staff in on that, the team?
Yeah. So what I do that I found works really well, and this has been through trial and error over the last several years, is when we're developing the brand narrative, for a brand, for a company, organization, I ask them to boil it down and find 9 one-word descriptors for their brand. And I categorize them in 3 categories, 3 words per category. First one is give me 3 words that describe your organization, your company, your group of people. Find 3 words that describe your offering. So these are values-based, attitudes, personality type-based, that sort of thing. And then give me 3 words that describe the outcome. What do people actually get? I call this the OOH exercise. O-O-O-H. OOH. Wow, it's cool. Organization, offering, and outcome. Once we have those 9 one-word descriptors, I ask them to go with their people and say, have each person here pick 1 or 2 words, use those words as a theme for a story, and then go and find a true story about a customer impact, an employee impact, a communication impact, community impact you may have had that word is reflected in it. It's the theme. So maybe you say, everyone says innovation. I say you can't have innovation because everyone says that, but we'll just say innovation. Go and find a story where innovation is the theme of it and tell me about an actual moment where that innovation appeared and we took advantage of it or we created it in our world. So, and then in that little story, I like to break those down to these 5 primal elements of story. Tell me about a time when. Give me a timestamp. When did it happen? When you do that, it has a way of triggering our brain, the audience, to say, oh, Park's telling me a story. Something must have happened if he's telling me when something occurred. And our brain cares about what happens. It doesn't care about anything else. It wants to know what the hell happens. A location stamp, where did it happen? a central character, one individual at the center of that story that your audience can relate to, the action and surprise outcome from that action. What happened? And what was the result of that happening? And then the aha moment. How does that support our business take on innovation and how we are innovative and so forth? When you do that, these little stories start popping up all over the place and it proofs out your brand. So you might say, well, we're innovative, but then you have a hard time finding those stories. So then you have to question yourself, well, gosh, maybe we're not that innovative. Maybe we need to focus more on innovation so that these stories will materialize. What I have found, though, typically, Ken, when you do this, is you get your team now going out, spotting these stories in the wild, bringing them in, building a library about them. And what you essentially and effectively are doing are telling stories about the true, real-world impact you and your brand are making. And from there, those are the elements you use for inbound marketing, outbound marketing, customer service, brand story strategy. No longer need some big, fancy, creative, expensive campaign. Tell true stories about your brand in clever, interesting ways. Keep them short to the point, and you will win your audience. You will win the day.
You know, I just want to interject this. To me, it is such a foreign idea, and I know it's prolific throughout the marketing and the branding industry, but to create a story that isn't 100% authentic about your business is such a foreign concept to me. And what you're saying is, it's resonating with me because that's like who I am. I abhor, actually, I don't do this often and I take no pleasure in this, but I actually fired a client last week because he lied to me, and he lied to me about something that I thought was really important. And so, you talk about authenticity. It's such a foreign concept to me that people would actually fabricate or make up. And I know that's what a lot of marketing companies want their clients to do. And I really love your approach. I absolutely love it. And I have a lot of respect for the fact that you're promoting, you didn't use the word integrity, but this is all about, that's what authenticity is like you're being genuine. What is truth? Truth is really, a lot of people say, well, truth is relative. No, truth is reality. And so telling a real story about what really happens, I think, is the only way to do business. And you've given people a great platform and a great system to do this. Where do you see this brand storytelling movement, if you will? And I know there are a lot of people who should be jumping all over this and they've been dragging their feet, but now is the time. Park is laying this out for you beautifully. This is something you definitely want to take an advantage of, but what's the next iteration of this? Where is this headed next? The brand storytelling.
If you actually take the term storytelling out of it, where I think things are going, and as we're having this conversation now at the end of January in 2020, I'll put a timestamp on it because this becomes a living, breathing thing, forever. So here's what I think it is. We are on the precipice of another recession. I'm no financial wizard, but all I got to do is look at history, and we're beyond where that's going, when that should have happened. And I've talked to a lot of really smart financial people. They're thinking we're good for 2020, 2021, probably still have enough juice in the market, regardless of who gets elected president, to push us through that. But they are pretty much in consensus at the end of 2021 to into 2022. There is going to be a correction. It won't be probably as precipitous of a fall that we experienced in 2008. But we have a recession that's looming ahead of us, and it's hard to see it right now because the sun is out. We're making hay. Life is good.
Hey, can I just interject something real quick? Guys, he just had a fabulous guest on that talked about recession-proofing your business. That was your last episode, was it not?
It is this week. Yes.
I listened to that. Yeah. It's on his podcast. You have to listen to it. It was a fabulous show. Sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to throw that in there because
he talks about how to rock the recession. He, like everybody else, got rocked by it last time. Essentially almost lost his business, and then in the process realized, oh, here's how I've got to prepare for it.
His mother-in-law bailed him out, right? That was the mother-in-law that bailed him out?
And I couldn't agree with him more. A new book out, check it out, Rock the Recession. And that really got me thinking too, and I recorded that episode. I think he's so right. He's calling for one maybe in 2021. I don't know. It might be a little bit longer, but here's my point to your question. Why brand storytelling? The purpose of your brand is going to be your core differentiator in the market moving forward. It's going to separate you from the noise and the abundance, the myriad of choices your customers have right now. So when you dial in your brand story about your purpose and get super focused on that right now, you will make even more money while the going is good, and you're going to get yourself ahead of the pack. When the downturn hits, you will be in a position number one to retain your top talent because you're still making money, but they've got a story, they've got a purpose that they are bought into, and come hell or high water, they're going to help you see it through. The other thing is your differentiation in the marketplace. As you start seeing your competitors falling away, gives you an opportunity to go out and cherry pick some of their customers, cherry pick some of their best clients or employees, because you have a purpose bigger than just making money. And when you focus on that purpose, you actually make more money than if you're just focused on the bottom line. So the trend, I believe now, for the really smart brands, forget about the old-fashioned way of branding. Create a brand narrative strategy, structure that communicates your origin story and backs it up with the real-world impact you're having now, while pointing to a more promising imagined reality or future that your audiences, your customers, your employees want to live into, and that you can make happen through your offering. And here's what I guarantee, because I've seen this. Our clients have grown as much as 600%. Adelante Healthcare, Aveen Tafoya will lay claim to that. We have grown 600% since getting our brand story straight. Andre Martin Hobbs up in Montreal, a used car dealership, that's a whole time for another story, is doing amazing things, helping buyers repair their credit, has quadrupled his growth because in the last 3 years, because he got his brand story straight to a much bigger purpose than just selling cars, and he's got his people totally bought into it. So the trend now for the really smart, forward-thinking, non-complacent brands are to dial in your story now, because it's going to take you 6 to 8 months to really get it right and push it out to the market. Then it's going to take you another 1.5 years of pounding that drum and letting people know what you stand for and what you are about for it to really take hold. And if we do the math, that's going to place you right about at the precipice of the next recession, or it may already be in the recession, but you are already way ahead of your competition.
Absolutely.
I think that's what the next trend is. Storytelling is simply a vehicle to help you get there faster.
Nice. So what about this? Talk just briefly, if you could, because we're going to run out of time here before too long. I want to know about the story cycle system. How do we dive into that? I mean, what's the process? Is that a training you have? Is that on your website? Is that part of the Facebook group? How do we access that training?
Yep. You can go to the website, businessofstory.com, and I have a ton of tools, free tools and techniques for you there. I've got this new little workbook out. I've had this workbook out for a while, but I've added to it. And it takes you through how to use the and button, therefore, how to use the 5 primal elements of story, and how to use the 10-step story cycle system to craft your overall brand narrative. And you can get those books through me over at businessofstory.com. Listen to the podcast, or there's a ton of trainings. Now, what I am going to be doing is I have an online training that will be coming out in about 1 month. If your listeners are interested in learning more about it, they can go to businessofstory.com/apply.
And then your book, is there a pre-order? Can you pre-order on Amazon the book or through your website?
Eventually. We're about a month away from pre-ordering that and about 2 months away from it being out. We're just going through the final approval on the design and then off to the publisher and finishing up. So depending on when this airs, by March, you'll be able to do a pre-order on that book, and by April, it will start shipping. And that's, again, called Brand Bewitchery, How to Wield the Story Cycle System to Craft Spellbinding Stories for Your Brand.
All right, here's my last question. What's the one question that I should have asked today, Park, that I didn't ask? I asked this to everyone, and I'll be honest and own up to it as I did on the last show. I stole that from Larry King. You know, before I started doing these podcasts, I studied Larry King. I watched a bazillion videos of him interviewing people and several other people. And when I heard him do that over and over again at the end of his interviews, I'm like, wow, I want to steal that.
I think the question is, how much doubt do I confront in my life, because I think that's a question for everybody that's trying to run a business out there. How much doubt? So I can sit here and talk with you, Ken, and share my knowledge that I've built over years and practice every single day, and it comes out. And I can tell you that I, like everybody else, suffer from that same doubt. Gosh, am I really doing this right? Do people really care? You get really busy and then you have slow times. Then you get really busy and you have slow times. And I think that the best way for me to overcome that doubt is to realize that I am on my own personal hero's journey, just like you are, just like your listeners are. And those slow times and those times of doubt are the natural progression of any story. It's a natural progression of any journey, of any life, of any company. So when you ever feel that doubt coming in, and I had it a little bit earlier in the week, like thinking, I wish I was doing more over here, more over that. I get a call from a gentleman like you, get invited on your show, and it's uplifted my spirits, because it's another way of this force of story saying, Park, you're on the right path. You're doing the right things.
Sweet.
Otherwise, Ken wouldn't have you on to share your story with the world. So that's my answer to how do you overcome doubt. Whenever you're feeling that, we all feel it, just remind yourself, this is a natural part of the hero's journey, and you are simply on your own personal journey. You'll get through it, and you'll be stronger because of it.
Okay,
and
sweet.
Ken, since it's coming out so soon, if you wouldn't mind adding, let your viewers, listeners know that I will be back at Social Media Marketing World in San Diego. I am doing a 90-minute workshop on Sunday, May 1st, a 90-minute workshop starting at around 3 p.m. And then I'm going to be doing a follow-up conference classroom setting either Monday or Tuesday. They haven't given me the exact time yet. For all of those that were in the session and want to work on their brand story directly with me, they can come in for an hour and workshop their story with me. So I'm really, really excited about that. 5th year to be there. And for any of your viewers and listeners, if you happen to be at Social Media Marketing World, please, please, please look me up and let me know you're listening to Ken's show.
Awesome. That'd be perfect. Hey, listen, I really, really appreciate you being on and taking the time. And I love this story about your son's artwork. And actually, it's a pretty sweet piece of art. I like that. I'm liking that a lot. So
I'll let him know. Well, Ken, thank you so much for having me here. It's been a real honor.
All right. We'll talk soon. Thank you.
Our objective with this podcast is to help you and your business stand out in the marketplace by crystallizing your messaging, marketing, and communications. On behalf of the whole Ken Newhouse team, thanks for listening.